You ever feel like someone saw right through you, not in a scary way, but in a way that made you feel something again, noticed? Really noticed. I didn't plan for any of it to happen. I didn't wake up one day and decide to crave what wasn't mine. But life doesn't always ask for permission. It just happens slowly, quietly. Like rain soaking into your clothes before you even realize you're wet. It started with a glance. Just a look. Harmless, right? But that look lingered a little too long, and maybe. The worst part, I didn't look away. You see, when you've been invisible for so long, being seen feels like a rescue. Me husband hadn't touched me in weeks, hadn't asked me how I was doing, what I was feeling, if I was okay. He'd kiss the kids. Good night, fall. Into bed, turn over, and sleep. I'd lie there wide awake, wondering when exactly I disappeared from his world. So when someone else looked at me like I still existed, I let that moment breathe. I didn't push it away. He didn't say anything at first. But his silence said enough, and the way he noticed when I changed my hair, when I wore something different, when I laughed too loudly at a joke that wasn't even funny. He noticed it all, and I noticed him noticing me. That's when it started. Not with a touch, not with words, just a feeling, that slow, aching warmth in your chest, when you realize someone sees the parts of you thought had died a long time ago. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just flattered that I'd never cross any lines, but some lines don't need to be crossed to be broken. Some lines blur until you can't even tell they were there in the first place. He never asked to touch, he just asked to watch. And what wrecked me was realizing I wanted that too. They say the most dangerous desires are the ones you never speak aloud. Mine began with silence, and his came with a look. A look. Pretended not to notice because part of me wanted the same thing. What began as curiosity became a slow, steady undoing. I thought I could control until the moment I couldn't. And now I'm here telling you this, not to confess, not to explain, but because stories like this, they live in shadows, in bedrooms filled with silence, in marriages that look perfect from the outside but are starving on the inside. So, if this already feels too close to home, if something inside you is whispering, "I've felt that too," then stay with me, because this isn't just a story. It's a memory I never thought I'd say out loud. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales. Unfold where silence becomes stories too heavy to carry alone. And maybe, just maybe, this one might echo something you've never dared say aloud either. I wasn't searching for anything, but I noticed when someone finally looked at me like I was still there. Not a mom, not a wife, not a shadow, just me. I'm in my mid-30s, 2 kids, a house that's always half clean, and a heart that's been half full. 4 years, my husband. He used to hold me like I was something fragile, used to call me as calm in the chaos. Now he barely speaks unless he needs something. Phone in one hand, silence in the other. We share space. We don't share much else. We sleep in the same bed, but it might as well be 2 islands. I ask him about his day. He shrugs. He asks me if we have more toothpaste. That's the level of depth now, and I tell myself, it's normal. Marriage changes, life gets loud. Kids take over. But deep down I was starving for something I couldn't name. Then there's Shim. He's been around for years. My husband's friend, technically. But over time he became mine too, in quiet ways. He's the type that notices things other people miss. Like when I cut my hair, or when my eyes look tired. He asks questions. No one else bothers to ask. Hellistons. Like it matters. He never flirts. Never crosses lines. But there's something in the way he looks at me, like he sees all the things I try to hide. Our house is calm. Too calm. It's the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like waiting. Waiting for something to break. Waiting for someone to notice. The walls closing in. Dinner is quiet. The kids laugh. He scrolls. I clear plates. And sometimes I look at that friend across the table. And I wonder if he hears the silence, too. We don't talk about feelings in this house. We don't argue, we just exist. But with him, it's like... I remember. I used to feel one night I caught him looking at me while I laughed. At something my daughter said. It wasn't a flirtatious look. It wasn't even bold. It was soft, curious, like he was memorizing a version of me. No one else seemed to see anymore, and I felt myself lean toward that warmth without even moving. I told myself. It was innocent, that it was just friendship. But even as I said it, something inside me stirred, something I hadn't felt in years. Attention, longing, recognition, not of who I am now, but of who I used to be and maybe who I still wanted to be. That's the truth. That's where it all began. Not with a kiss, not with a touch, but with two people quietly, wondering what it would feel like to be wanted again. It was just a weekend gathering. Nothing out of the ordinary. Couple of friends, some neighbors, the kids running wild in the backyard. Sticky fingers, laughter, echoing through the open windows. I wore a loose dress. Something simple, hair pulled up, no makeup. But he looked at me like I was still something like the mess. The noise, the stains on my shirt didn't erase me. He helped with the grill, made the kids laugh, told stories that made even my husband smile. And for a while, I convinced myself I was imagining it. All the way. His eyes stayed on me a beat. Too long, the way his voice softened when he said my name. The way he noticed things my husband never did anymore. Like how I rubbed the back of my neck when I was tired. Or how I shifted my weight when I felt invisible. Evening came. The sun dipped, everyone started leaving in wave skids. Sleepy plates stacked leftover food. Wrapped up, my husband disappeared into the den, same as always, back to his screen, back to his world. And then there was just me and him. He offered to help clean up. Said it casually. I'll stay behind. You look like you've had a long day. I should have said no. Should have smiled politely and sent him on his way. But instead I nodded. We didn't speak much. As we cleared the table. Just the clatter of dishes, the hum of the dishwasher, the weight of everything. Unspoken between us, he stood close. Enough that I could feel the heat of his body not touching. Just near, too near, I dropped a spoon. He bent down to pick it. Up at the same time I did. And when we both straightened, our eyes locked. He didn't say anything. But he didn't have, to his eyes asked the question. My own heart had been whispering for weeks. Do you feel it too? I looked away, pretended I didn't understand. But my hands shook. When I turned on the faucet and, still Hellingered, wiped the counter, asked about my daughter's school, complimented the food, little things. But his tone felt like it was. Searching for something. Underneath the surface, he leaned on the counter, watching me dry the last plate, and there was this quiet, not awkward, not loud, just charged my heartbeat faster. My throat felt tight, not from fear, from awareness. I told myself it was nothing, just a friend being kind. Just a tired mom reading too much into a shared silence. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted. Something we weren't ready to admit. And yet somehow we already had. He said goodnight, didn't touch me, didn't lean in, just looked one last time and left. I closed the door. Behind him. Stood there for a moment, hand on the knob, breathing too hard for. Someone who hadn't moved that night. I crawled into bed beside my husband. He didn't say a word, didn't notice the silence, pulsing off me like a scream. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every second. And that's when I knew something shifted. We both felt it, even if we didn't say a word. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. My body was still, but my mind kept circling back to that look, that silence, that electricity I tried so hard to ignore. I woke up the next morning with this strange ache in my chest, not guilt, not quite, just confusion, a feeling I couldn't name. I got up before everyone else, showered longer than usual, stared at myself in the mirror for a while, and for the first time in months, I wanted to look nice. Put on a dress I hadn't worn since. Before the kids, nothing flashy, Just something that made me feel like me again. Added a little lip color. Fixed my hair. Not too much, just enough. He didn't notice my husband. He sat at the table scrolling through his phone, sipping coffee like always mumbled. A morning didn't even look up, I stood. There waiting for something. A compliment, glance, anything but nothing. Came and then I saw it, that same friend he'd sent a simple message, "You looked beautifully yesterday. I hope you know that my heart skipped." Not because of the words, but because someone saw me and that right there was the beginning of the storm. I started putting effort into things again. Clothes, hair, even perfume. But not for the man I married. I told myself it was harmless, that attention isn't a crime that I deserve to feel noticed. But some days, I think I wanted my husband to notice. Just so I'd have an excuse to stop, to pull myself back, to say, "See, I was just trying to get your attention," but he didn't. He noticed the empty peanut butter jar, the rising bills, the misplaced remote. But never me and thee were invisible. I felt at home, the more live. I felt whenever that friend walked into a room. It wasn't physical, not yet, but I started looking forward to things. I shouldn't like hearing his voice at the door, like catching his glance from across the lawn, like seeing that faint smile when we locked eyes for half a second too long. I started laughing more when he was around, fixing my posture, touching my neck when I talked small. Things that made me feel wanted, even if just in my own imagination. And every time he looked at me like I mattered, I hated myself a little because I knew what I was doing, even if I kept pretending I didn't. I was building a secret world in my heart, brick by brick, and he was in it, and my husband wasn't. But still, I told myself it was fine. It wasn't an affair. It was just attention. Just harmless warmth in a cold, familiar house. But that's the lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? That something only matters when it's physical, that we're safe, as long as we don't cross the line. But the truth, I'd already crossed it in my mind and my longing in the way. I waited for someone else to look at me. Instead of praying my husband would finally see me again, it was my idea. The movie night. Just something casual, something for the kids. I texted a few people. He was the only one who replied. I told myself it was no big deal. Just a friend, just a movie. We'd all sit together, eat popcorn, laugh, and then go to bed. Like nothing mattered. But when he showed up, and I opened that door, the air changed. He brought snacks, smiled like usual. But the way his eyes met mine, it wasn't usual. The kids picked a movie. Something silly. We dimmed the lights. So everyone got comfortable. My husband sat in the armchair, already scrolling on his phone. He barely looked at the screen. Barely noticed the three of us in the room. I sat at one end of the couch. He sat at the other. The kids nestled between us, giggling, tossing popcorn completely, unaware that something quiet and dangerous was unfolding around them. I couldn't focus on the movie. I could feel him, not his touch, not his breath, just his presence like a magnetic pull. I didn't want but couldn't resist at one point. Our eyes met across the room just for a second, but it felt like everything stopped. My heart raced, my throat tightened. I looked away first because if I didn't, I might not have looked away yet. All the movie ended. The kids were half asleep, curled up like little warm reminders of the life I'd built, a life I loved, a life I was betraying silently. Noon moved. Not right away. The credits rolled. My husband got up and mumbled something about checking an email, left. The room didn't say goodnight. It was just me and him in the dim room, in that impossible silence. We didn't speak. We didn't smile. We just sat there. My hand brushed against the throw blanket. I clutched it like a lifeline because everything inside me was screaming, wanting, afraid. And then he whispered, barely audible. I wasn't watching the movie. I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because my silence was louder than any reply. I stood up, started gathering the popcorn bowls. He followed me to the kitchen like always, but nothing felt like always anymore. He didn't touch me, didn't lean in, didn't confess anything, but the way he looked at me when I turned around, that look said everything. Everything I was scared to hear, and worse, everything I wanted to believe. I should have told him to stop. I should have drawn a line, but I didn't, because in that moment something unspoken passed between us. Not touch, not a kiss, but agreement that we were both feeling it, that we were both waiting for, the same thing, that we were already too close to something we couldn't come back from. He left after that, quietly, respectfully, but the weight of that moment stayed behind. I locked the door behind him, not because I wanted to shut him out, but because I knew the next time I might not. And somewhere deep down, beneath the guilt, beneath the fear, was this tiny trembling part of me, hoping there would be a next time it was late. The house was quiet in that suffocating way it gets after midnight, when even the walls feel like they're listening. I couldn't sleep. I paced the kitchen barefoot, holding a mug of tea I had no intention of drinking. Then there was a knock, soft 3 taps, like he wasn't sure he should be there, but came anyway. I opened the door, no words, just eye-stired, kind, hesitant. I stepped aside. He walked in. We didn't pretend. This was casual. We didn't talk about the weather, or the movie from before, or the kids. He sat at the table. I leaned against the counter. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was full too. Full. Finally, he spoke quietly, not looking directly at me. You haven't been happy, just that. No question mark, just a truth. Dropped in the middle of the room like it had been waiting years to land. I didn't deny it. It couldn't. I stared at the floor, at my chipped nail polish, at the tear in the bottom of my pajama pants. I said, I'm tired. He nodded, and then softer than before, almost like he was afraid of his own voice. He said, I don't want to do anything. I just want to see it. I looked up slowly. See what I whispered. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't explain. You as you are without the armor. And I broke, because no one had said anything like that to me in years. Not even close. Not you're beautiful. Not you're sexy. Not I want you, just I want to see you, he said. It like a prayer, not a demand, not a fantasy, not lust. And what shattered me was realizing part of me wanted it too. I'd spent years being looked through, not into, and suddenly here was someone asking for nothing but offering to witness me. I felt exposed, like my skin had been peeled back, like he could see every crack, every ache, every quiet scream I'd buried beneath my role. As wife, mother, ghost, I sat down across from him. My hands trembled. You shouldn't say things like that. I whispered. I know, he said. But it's already been said. We didn't move, we didn't touch. We didn't even breathe too loud. The room was thick with tension, but not the kind that leads to skin on skin. It was the kind that split something open deep inside you. There was no physical betrayal that night, no stolen kiss, no hands reaching across the table. But what happened was something far deeper: emotional permission. We gave each other the right to feel what we were feeling, to stop pretending we didn't feel it. And that was the betrayal, because once you've been seen, you can't go back to being invisible. Not without bleeding. The next morning, I couldn't look at him. Not my husband. Not my friend. Not even myself. I moved through the house like I was, trying not to leave a trace, made breakfast, packed lunches, folded laundry. I didn't remember washing. We didn't talk after that night, not even a message, not even a glance when we passed each other. At school drop-off or in the grocery store parking lot, he didn't come over didn't offer to help with the garden like he used to, didn't linger near the front porch when my husband wasn't home, and I avoided mirrors. Not because I couldn't face what I'd done, but because I couldn't face what I wanted. My husband remained the same detached, predictable, still scrolling through his phone every night, still forgetting if I'd told him something that morning or not. But something in him shifted just a little. He started watching me out of the corner of his eye, noticing when I got quiet, asking once if I was okay, just once. And I said yes. Of course I said yes, because what else could I say? Actually, I'm slowly falling apart under the weight of a conversation that didn't involve touching but still feels like it. Tore something in me wide open. No, I couldn't say that the silence between us became heavier. Not the usual kind. This was an absence. It was presence restrained. And it wasn't guilt that kept me quiet. It was fear. Fear that he might ask, that he might look me in the eye, really look and ask what's going on. Because I didn't know how I'd answer. And I was terrified that if I started talking, I wouldn't stop that. I'd tell the truth, that I'd tell him everything. Not just about the night, but about the years that led up to the loneliness, the aching, the slow erosion of us. But he never asked, and I never offered the friend. He disappeared, quietly, no big conversation, no goodbye. He just stopped coming around. But he left something behind, a shadow in the hallway at the sink in the back of my mind. Every time I reached for the light switch at night, he was gone. But I still felt him in the silence, in the places where we almost crossed a line, in the breath we held back, in the words was swallowed. My marriage didn't fall apart. Not on the surface. Dinner was still made. Bills were still paid. Kids still laughed. But something inside me had cracked, and no one seemed to notice. And maybe that's what hurt most. Not the betrayal, not the longing, but the fact that I was drowning quietly, and no one thought to ask why. The smile on my face looked tired, carried on like women do, like mothers do, like wives do. But everything inside me felt different now, because once someone truly sees you, you can't go back to being unseen. You can pretend. But part of you always remembers. I still wonder if betrayal needs a body, or if a thought is enough, if a glance that lingers too long, if a silence filled with wanting, if a heartbeat skipped for someone else's. Presence counts as a sin, because I never touched him, not once, not his hand, not his face, but I saw myself in his eyes, and I wanted to stay there longer than it should have in his eyes. I wasn't tired, I wasn't ordinary. I wasn't forgotten, I was seen. I was felt. And for a woman who'd been invisible for so long, that felt like resurrection. But what does that make me? I go over that. Night, again and again, the words. The pause, the space between his wanting and my silence. I tell myself I didn't cross a line. But maybe the truth is I drew the line where it felt safest, where I could still pretend I hadn't betrayed anyone. But I know better. I know what I felt. And sometimes the ache of what never happened is heavier than if it had. My husband still kisses me on the forehead when he leaves for work, still asks what need from the store, still reminds me to pay the electric bill, but he doesn't ask how I'm doing. He doesn't notice when I cry quietly in the bathroom. He doesn't see the way I flinch when he walks past me, as if I'm bracing for a question that never comes. And maybe that's the real betrayal, that I build a life where I could go missing in plain sight. Was it weakness to let my heart wander, or was it something deeper, something softer, something sadder? Was it loneliness, disguised as courage, because to be wanted, truly wanted, can feel like air when you've been gasping? I didn't ask to be found, but once I was, I couldn't forget how it felt. And now I live between two truths. The life I chose and the one I imagined just for a moment, in someone else's gaze. And that is a kind of grief no one prepares you for. Have you ever wanted something so badly, knowing full well it could ruin everything? Not because you're reckless, Not because you're selfish, but because you are tired of being invisible, tired of giving and showing, up and holding it all together only to feel like no one even saw you standing there. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't wake up craving destruction, but somewhere in the silence of my marriage, I started shrinking, and then someone saw me. That's what. This really was not lust, not escape, just recognition, and I wonder, does that make me unfaithful or just human? Maybe you've been there too, standing in a kitchen late at night, heart racing for reasons. You don't have words for smiling too long at someone. You shouldn't, waiting for a question you secretly hope. They won't ask, because you don't know what your answer would be. So let me ask you something. Now, was it betrayal? Or just an unmet need wrapped in silence? Was it wrong or just real? Tell me in the comments. No judgment here. Just truth, because maybe your story sounds a little like mine. And maybe mine sounds like someone else's secret. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think of the version of yourself you don't talk about, then please, don't just scroll past. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence becomes stories, too heavy to carry alone. Tap the bell. The next tale might echo, something you've never dared say out loud. And if you're still listening, thank you. Sometimes, just being heard can be its own kind of healing.